August 30th, 2014, 3:55 a.m. Christina Morris walks into a Plano parking garage with an acquaintance, and that's the last clear image the world ever gets of her. No goodbye, no exit footage, just a young woman disappearing in a place flooded with cameras. Minutes later, his car glides out alone. Cold, ordinary, unstoppable, like nothing happened. Her car stays behind, parked and untouched, as if she might return any second. Then her phone starts sending those normal, end-of-night texts, battery low, one more message, and then sudden silence. In a busy entertainment district where people think they're safe, the story collapses into a terrifying gap. How does someone vanish between concrete walls without a single confirmed step afterward? He says they split up, but the digital trail doesn't stop when his story does. And when investigators finally look where nobody wants to look, inside the parts of a car you never think about, the case takes a turn that feels like betrayal, not mystery. Because the most chilling possibility isn't that Christina was taken by a stranger. It's that the danger walked in right beside her. This is one of the disturbing stories that makes you rethink safe places. This is the horrifying case of Christina Morris. To understand why North Texas stood still when Christina Morris vanished, you have to understand the spark she carried. Those who knew her didn't just like her. They were drawn to her like a magnet. She was the kind of person who saw the best in everyone, sometimes to a fault. She lived by a single, hauntingly prophetic James Dean quote: "Dream as if you'll live forever. Live as if you'll die today." Christina was a native Planoite who had navigated a complex but deeply loving family life. Her parents, Mark and Johnny, had divorced when she was just an infant, but Christina refused to see it as a loss. To her, it simply meant her world had doubled. She famously told friends it was like having two moms and two dads, a blended family that was exceptionally close-knit. In the summer of 2014, 23-year-old Christina was at a turning point. She had earned her marketing degree from UT Dallas and was working for an online dating service. Just days before Labor Day weekend, she received the news she'd been waiting for. She was moving into the company's photography department, a role that finally combined her professional skills with her deepest passion for visual storytelling. But while her professional life was taking off, her personal life was under immense pressure. Christina was living in Fort Worth with her boyfriend of 1 year, Hunter Foster. They had known each other since the 7th grade, a long-term bond that had survived Hunter's time in New York, pursuing a career as an actor and model. Now back in Texas, the reality of living together was a jarring adjustment. Hunter was currently out of work and spent much of his time partying, while Christina worked long hours to support them both financially. The weight of being the sole provider was causing cracks. On Friday, August 29th, the start of Labor Day weekend, those cracks became a canyon. Christina and Hunter had been fighting all day. Exhausted and needing to blow off some steam, Christina reached out to her friend Taylor. From the driver's seat of her car, she poured out her heart, questioning if her relationship with Hunter even had a future. Taylor managed to calm her down, and Christina made a choice. She wouldn't let the drama ruin her holiday. She put on a brave face, took a selfie to mark the start of the night, and began the 45-minute drive from Fort Worth to Plano. She was headed to a high school reunion at the Shops at Legacy, a place that felt like home. She was looking for comfort, for laughter, and for a temporary escape from the stress waiting for her back in Fort Worth. She had no way of knowing that by driving toward her past, she was driving directly into a trap. By 11 p.m. on August 29th, Christina had arrived in Plano. She met a group of old friends from Allen High School at an apartment belonging to Paulina Petrosky. The setting was the Shops at Legacy, a wealthy development of high-end bars, restaurants, and luxury residences. It was the kind of place where you don't look over your shoulder, the kind of place where safety is marketed as part of the lifestyle. The group, which included Paulina, Sabrina Boss, Enrique Aroki, and others, moved through the local circuit, Henry's Tavern, followed by Scruffy Duffy's. To any outsider, they looked like any other group of 20-somethings celebrating a holiday weekend. But inside the group, the energy was fractured. While her friends were popping shots and becoming increasingly intoxicated, Christina was described as up and down. She remained relatively sober, nursing only a few drinks because she knew she had a long drive back to Fort Worth. But her sobriety only made her more acutely aware of her growing distress. Her mind wasn't on the party. It was 45 miles away, on the boyfriend who wasn't answering her. Between 2:12 a.m. and 3:48 a.m., Christina sent a flurry of texts to Hunter Foster. At first, she pleaded with him to come pick her up because she had temporarily misplaced her car keys. But as the night wore on and Hunter remained silent, her frustration turned to a sinking feeling. She didn't know that while she was looking for her keys in Plano, Hunter was in downtown Dallas, drinking with his own friends and, unbeknownst to her, facilitating an illegal drug deal with an undercover federal officer. By 3:30 a.m., the party was winding down. Christina had finally found her keys and made a definitive choice. She was going home to confront Hunter. Her battery was at its final 1%, a sliver of red on a dying screen. She sent one final, heartbreaking text. "I'm sorry. Why can't you talk to me? Good night. I hope you're okay. Because I'm not." It was at this exact moment of peak vulnerability, upset, exhausted, and isolated, that Enrique Iroquois stepped forward. To the group, Enrique was barely a friend. He was a passing acquaintance, a familiar face from high school who had been invited along to not leave him out. Earlier that night, Enrique had been fixated on another woman, Sabrina Boss, becoming visibly angry when she rejected his advances. Now, as Sabrina went to sleep in a spare room and Christina prepared to leave, Enrique saw his opportunity. He offered to walk Christina to the garage, claiming he was heading out to see his girlfriend. It was a polite gesture that no one in the room questioned. 10 minutes after they left, a friend called Christina to check on her. She sounded fine, telling him she was almost at her car. That was the last time anyone heard her voice. At 3:55 a.m., the CCTV cameras caught them entering the parking garage together. Christina was trailing slightly behind Enrique, walking willingly into the darkness. 3 minutes later, Enrique's Camaro pulled out. Christina, her car, and her story remained behind. Saturday morning in North Texas arrived with the usual sluggishness of a holiday weekend. At the apartment in Fort Worth, Hunter Foster woke up around 10 o'clock or 11 a.m. to an empty bed. He later claimed he wasn't worried. They had been fighting, and he simply assumed Christina was staying with her parents or, as he would later tell police, perhaps she'd been picked up for a due. But as the hours ticked by, the silence became deafening. Christina was a woman of habit and responsibility. She had a shift scheduled that Saturday, and she never missed work without calling. When her coworkers at the dating service realized she was a no-show, a sinking feeling began to spread through her social circle. By Sunday, her mother, Johnny, felt a knot in her stomach she had never experienced before. A mother's intuition that the James Dean spirit of her daughter hadn't just gone quiet, it had been silenced. On Tuesday, September 2nd, the search became official. Mark Morris placed the call that no parent ever wants to make. Detectives immediately headed to Paulina's apartment, tracing the last known steps of the vibrant 23-year-old. They didn't have to look far to find the first alarming clue. In the parking garage of the shops at Legacy, sitting on the first floor, was Christina's Toyota Celica. It was locked. It was undisturbed. To the naked eye, there were no signs of a struggle, no forced entry, and nothing dropped on the ground. It was as if she had reached her destination and simply evaporated. Detectives turned to Paulina Petrosky. Who was she with? Who saw her last? Paulina pointed to a name that meant almost nothing to her. Enrique Iroquois. He was a face from high school, an acquaintance invited to the reunion just so he wouldn't feel left out. When Detective Kathy St. called Enrique, he sounded like the perfect witness. Cooperative, polite, and eager to help. But during that first interview, Enrique's memory was conveniently hazy. He claimed he had consumed 10 shots of hard liquor, 5 or 6 beers, Adderall, and marijuana. He told police that he and Christina did leave the apartment together, but they banana split at the end of the apartment complex. He claimed she walked off in one direction to her car, while he headed toward a completely different parking lot. He even offered a potential lead. He remembered Christina being on a phone call, her voice raised in frustration, as if she were arguing with someone. This detail was a masterclass in redirection. It pointed the police directly back at the red herring, the boyfriend, Hunter Foster. And Hunter wasn't helping his own case. When detectives asked for his phone, he became visibly uncomfortable and refused. He had deleted text messages. He was acting like a man with a dark secret. For the first 72 hours, the police were exactly where a predator would want them. Looking at the grieving, drug-dealing boyfriend, while the polite acquaintance who walked her into the darkness was allowed to simply go to work. For the first few days of the investigation, Enrique Iroquois was just another witness, a distracted guy with a hazy memory of a drunken night. But detectives in North Texas have a saying, people lie, but the footage doesn't. When the Plano PD finally synced the timestamps from the parking garage, Enrique's banana split story didn't just crack, it shattered. The cameras showed them entering the garage together at 3:55 a.m. They weren't walking in different directions. They were together. And then came the smoking gun of the timeline, 3:58 a.m., just 3 minutes after they entered on foot. Enrique's gray Camaro was filmed pulling out of the exit. No other car left that garage. No person was seen leaving on foot. The only way Christina Morris left that building was inside Enrique's car. When detectives pulled Enrique back into the station and slid the diagram across the table, they watched him closely. As they played the footage, the room went silent. Enrique, the man who claimed to be one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, suddenly went quiet. He was hesitant. He stammered, claiming he must have forgotten because he was so intoxicated, even suggesting he might have moved his car during the night. But it wasn't just his words that were changing, it was his body. When Enrique stepped into the station, detectives were taken aback. He was sporting injuries that looked less like car repairs and more like a violent struggle. He had scratches, bruises, and a distinct mark on his forearm that police were convinced was a bite mark. His knuckles were bloodied. His explanation: he claimed a tire rim fell on him, and in a fit of rage, he had punched his own car, leaving a dent. But Enrique's Saturday morning hadn't been spent at a mechanic's shop. While Christina's family was beginning to panic, Enrique was at a car wash. Surveillance footage captured a chilling scene. Enrique standing in the bay, staring into his trunk for an extended period with an intense, haunting focus. He wasn't just washing the car. He was scrubbing, vacuuming, and staring, as if trying to erase the presence of someone who had been there just hours before. His co-workers at the Sprint store in Allen noticed it, too. When he finally arrived for his shift, 3 hours late, he was limping, his ribs were hurting, and he looked messed up. He was out of sorts all day, a stark contrast to the polite acquaintance he pretended to be. The police now knew they were looking at a predator who had spent his morning cleaning a crime scene. But without a body and without a confession, they needed something more. They needed the digital tether. While Enrique Iroquois was busy telling the media he was one of the nicest people you'll ever meet, a silent witness was telling a much darker story. In the world of modern forensics, we often talk about the digital tether, the invisible leash that connects our movements to the towers above us. For over an hour after that gray Camaro pulled out of the parking garage, Christina Morris's phone and Enrique's phone were engaged in a haunting, synchronized dance. The data didn't lie. From 3:58 a.m. until 4:56 a.m., both devices pinged off the same towers: Spring Creek Boulevard, Granite Parkway, and finally, East Bethany Drive near Enrique's home in Allen. They were moving together. At 4:56 a.m., Christina's battery finally gave up, her phone dying in the darkness of whatever space she was being held in. Enrique's phone, however, stayed active for another 30 minutes, pinging as he finally arrived at his house. But the smoking gun wasn't in the air, it was in the trunk. In November 2014, after months of legal maneuvering, Plano detectives finally secured the warrant to forensically dismantle Enrique's 2010 Camaro. What they found shattered any remaining defense. Christina's DNA was discovered in multiple locations inside the trunk. This wasn't just a stray hair or a transfer from a casual encounter. Forensic analysts found a substantial amount of biological material, likely blood or saliva, embedded deep in the trunk mat. The prosecution's expert testified that the probability of this DNA belonging to anyone other than Christina Morris was effectively zero. It was, in their words, a statistical impossibility. The discovery of the DNA allowed investigators to piece together a terrifying psychological profile. They found that Enrique's phone was a digital museum of horror, filled with images and videos of women being bound, tortured, and mutilated. This wasn't a man who had forgotten where he parked. This was a man whose sick and twisted interests had finally found a real-world target. The theory of the struggle began to take shape. Prosecutors believed Enrique, fueled by the embarrassment of being rejected by Sabrina Boss earlier that night, made a pass at Christina as they reached their cars. When she rejected him, his frustration turned into a predatory rage. Whether he forced her into the trunk in those initial 3 minutes in the garage, or she willingly got into the passenger seat for a ride only to be overpowered later, the result was the same. Christina Morris was trapped in a space she feared most. Her father later reminded the world of a heartbreaking detail. Christina was deathly afraid of the dark and extremely claustrophobic. The thought of her trapped in that trunk, alone and fearing for her life while Enrique drove for over an hour, became the emotional heart of the case. A nightmare scenario that no life sentence could ever truly rectify. In September 2016, 2 years after Christina Morris vanished into that 3-minute window, the state of Texas finally brought Enrique Orochi to trial. But it was a trial haunted by a singular, agonizing absence. There was no body. There was no murder weapon. Because investigators still hadn't found Christina, the strongest charge the state could levy was aggravated kidnapping. Inside the courtroom, the prosecution laid out 2 chilling theories. The first suggested that after being rejected by Sabrina Boss earlier that night, Enrique hit Christina and forced her into his trunk in a drunken rage within that initial 3 minutes. The second, and perhaps more haunting theory, was that he offered her a ride home to Fort Worth. She may have gotten into his car willingly, seeking comfort in a familiar face, only to realize too late that he was driving the opposite direction. Whether by force or by trickery, the result was a violent struggle that left Enrique with bite marks and Christina's DNA embedded in his trunk mat. The defense fought back with every technicality they could find. They argued cross-contamination at the lab, they questioned the accuracy of the cell tower pings, and they pointed the finger back at the boyfriend, Hunter Foster. But after 17 hours of deliberation, the jury returned their verdict: guilty. Judge Mark Rush didn't hesitate. He handed down the maximum sentence: life in prison. But as the sentence was read, the courtroom witnessed a display of psychological coldness that no one would ever forget. While Christina's family stood just feet away, pouring out their hearts in victim impact statements, Enrique Orochi appeared completely dismissive. He sat rocking back and forth in his chair, looking away, and at several points, he was observed smirking at the grieving family. It was a final, silent act of cruelty from a man who still held the secret of Christina's location. The resolution of the mystery finally came in March 2018, 4 years after she vanished. Construction workers in Anna, Texas, clearing brush for a new housing development, discovered a human skull. It was Christina. She had been left in a field, abandoned to the elements. But this discovery brought a new, bitter legal reality. Because Enrique had already been convicted of the kidnapping that led to her death, double jeopardy rules prevented the state from pursuing a new capital murder charge. In the eyes of the law, the kidnapping was the crime he was already serving life for. Christina was finally brought home to the family that never stopped looking for her. As her sister Sarah told the world, they never truly wanted closure. They only ever wanted Christina. Today, Enrique Orochi sits in a maximum security prison in Abilene, Texas. He will not even be eligible for parole until December 12, 2044. He continues to claim his innocence, But for a family with 2 moms and 2 dads, the truth is finally resting in a field in North Texas, where the light of a vibrant life was once hidden, but never truly forgotten.
Richmond, North Yorkshire is the kind of place that makes you believe the world is still fundamentally good. Stone buildings the color of winter honey. Rolling countryside that stretches further than your eyes can follow. A town where people know each other's names, their cars, their routines. Where a familiar face at the local pub is not a coincidence. It is just Tuesday. This is where Jenny Nickel grew up. And by every account, she grew up well. She was 19 years old in the summer of 2005. 5'6", fair hair she wore in a ponytail, green eyes that her friends would have recognized from across a crowded room. She worked at the local co-op, knew most of her customers by name, and spent her evenings the way a lot of young people in small towns do. Out with friends, loud with music, alive with the particular kind of energy that belongs exclusively to people who haven't yet been given a reason to be afraid. But Jenny wasn't just a face in a crowd. She had depth. She had passions that were specifically and unmistakably hers. She was obsessed with Jimi Hendrix, not casually interested, genuinely obsessed, in the way that only people who feel music in their chest rather than just their ears can be. She channeled that passion into a rock band called No Fouling, and they were good enough to matter. Good enough to play the Richmond Live Music Festival. Good enough to reach the final of Battle of the Bands in 2002. These were not small things for a young woman from a small town. These were the early chapters of a life that was clearly going somewhere. She lived on Bolton Avenue with her parents, and a former cleaner, and Brian, a retired Army major. A modest, grounded family in a modest, grounded home. Brian had given her a teddy bear the previous Christmas, and she kept it in her room. Small detail. Remember it. Her friends would later say that Jenny kept things to herself, that she didn't open up easily, didn't confide readily, carried her private life close to her chest. At the time, that was simply how she was. Looking back, it meant that nobody, not her closest friends, not her parents, fully knew everything that was happening in her world. That gap between what people knew and what was actually true would become the fault line that ran through everything that followed. It was the 30th of June, 2005. Jenny was heading out for the evening. Nobody knew it was the last time they would see her. There is a particular cruelty in ordinary goodbyes. The ones where nobody knows to hold on a little longer. Where nobody thinks to ask one more question or stand in the doorway for a few extra seconds just to be sure. Jenny said goodbye to her mother, and on the evening of June 30th, 2005, the same way she had said goodbye 100 times before. Casually. Easily. The way you leave a house you fully expect to return to. She didn't say where she was going. She didn't say who she was meeting. Based on what she took with her, it looked like she was heading out for a camping trip. And that was nothing unusual. Jenny camped regularly. She would head out with friends, spend a night under the sky she loved, and come back the following day easy and unhurried. And had no reason to worry. This was just Jenny being Jenny. She told her mother she wouldn't be back that night and walked out the door. The following day came and went quietly at first. Jenny had made plans to pick up a friend and head out together. When she didn't show, her friend tried calling. No answer. The phone rang out into nothing. Still, people rationalize. Phones die. Plans change. Maybe something came up. The mind finds every possible innocent explanation before it will allow itself to consider the alternative. Then Monday arrived. Jenny didn't show up for her shift at the co-op. That was different. That could not be explained away. A missed social plan is forgivable. A missed shift with no call, no message, no word of any kind. That is something else entirely. The people who knew Jenny began to feel the first cold edges of real fear settling around them. For days after she walked out of the house on Bolton Avenue and reported her daughter missing. That same afternoon and went looking herself, moving through the streets of Richmond the way a mother moves when she is trying very hard not to imagine the worst. And she found what she was dreading. Parked and abandoned in a local pub car park. Jenny's white Rover 214i, sitting there alone, engine cold, nobody inside. Jenny hadn't driven away. Whatever had happened to her had happened here. Close. Local. In the town where everyone knew everyone's name. The car had a fault, a habit of jumping out of gear. Jenny knew about it. She had been meaning to mention it to her dad. She never got the chance. When someone vanishes, there are two possibilities. Either something was done to them or they chose to leave. The investigation into Jenny Nichols' disappearance would spend its earliest weeks trying to determine which of those realities it was dealing with. The answer, when it came, was not delivered by a witness or a confession. It was delivered by a bank statement and a receipt for tanning sessions. But before that, the search. An incident room was established at Richmond Police Station. 20 officers were assigned to the case under the leadership of Detective Inspector Pete Martin. Door-to-door inquiries fanned out across the town. Hundreds of posters were distributed carrying Jenny's description. Fair hair, green eyes, 5'6", last seen in blue jeans, black trainers, and the khaki-hooded parka she wore so often it had become almost part of her identity. The community responded with genuine force. People came forward. Tips were followed. No stone was being left unturned. D.I. Martin made a public appeal that was quietly devastating in its simplicity. He begged Jenny, wherever she was, to call her parents. Just call. Just make any contact at all. Her parents stayed by the phone. It did not ring. Then Anne and Brian did something that no parent should ever have to do. They went into the woods themselves, into the Sandbeck plantation, a dense stretch of woodland off Longwood Bank, and searched for their daughter with their own hands. In the undergrowth, partially hidden beneath fallen leaves, they found her. Not Jenny herself, but pieces of her. Her cosmetics, a nightdress, intimate, private objects belonging to a young woman, discarded in the dirt of a forest like they meant nothing, like she meant nothing. The investigation widened and the picture it revealed was unambiguous. No money had been withdrawn from her bank account. Not before she left, not after. Her passport had not been taken. There were no travel arrangements, no bookings, no messages to friends arranging a place to stay. None of the quiet infrastructure that people build when they are planning to disappear. And then there was the detail that perhaps more than any other captured the brutal interruption of Jenny's life. She had prepaid for a course of 25 tanning sessions at a local salon. She had used 2 of them, 23 sessions already paid for, waiting for her to come back and use them. People who are planning to vanish do not pay in advance for things they will never collect. They do not walk away from the small ordinary investments of an ordinary continuing life. Jenny had not planned to go anywhere. She had been taken. On the 3rd of November 2005, the police made it official. This was no longer a missing person investigation. This was a murder inquiry. And almost in the same breath, they revealed something that would reframe everything that had come before and cast a long dark shadow over everything still to come. Jenny had been seeing someone. David Hodgson was 47 years old, married, a father of 2, and his daughters had gone to school with Jenny Nichols. Read that again slowly because it matters. This was not a stranger. This was not someone who crossed Jenny's path by accident or circumstance. This was a man who existed at the warm, trusted edges of her world. A man whose children sat in the same classrooms, walked the same corridors, shared the same small-town adolescence that Jenny did. A man who used that proximity the way a predator uses every advantage available to him, quietly, patiently, and over a very long time. David had been grooming Jenny since she was 14 years old. That is not a relationship. That is not complicated. That is a grown man with daughters her age deliberately and systematically dismantling the boundaries of a child over the course of years, engineering a power imbalance so deep and so early that by the time Jenny was an adult she had been shaped by his influence for longer than she could clearly remember. He would later admit that the 2 of them had slept together on 5 occasions, insisting carefully that this only began after she turned 16, as though the years before 16 had simply not happened. As though grooming a child stops being grooming because the law eventually catches up with the age. What the DNA evidence told investigators was considerably more straightforward. David and his brother Robert had spent years building wooden hides and huts in the surrounding woodland. Private structures tucked into the trees, used for drinking and camping and playing cards, away from the eyes of the town. David told investigators he had never taken Jenny to any of them. Scientific evidence recovered from inside 2 of those hides disagreed with him completely. The DNA confirmed that the 2 of them had had sexual contact in those locations. Hidden places, built with his own hands, in woods he knew better than almost anyone. Then there was Robert. In the months before Jenny disappeared, she had grown noticeably closer to David's brother. The 2 of them had gone camping together not long before she went missing. A trip Robert would later describe to police in detail. Nothing was found there. Robert was eventually released without charge, and the investigation turned its full weight elsewhere. But Robert's closeness to Jenny had not gone unnoticed by David. Those who knew him described a man who was possessive and deeply jealous. A man whose anger would visibly build if he saw Jenny talking to another man. As she grew closer to his brother, David's resentment had been quietly building alongside it. 9 days after she was last seen, David Hodgson was brought in for questioning. He denied everything. The officers listened, noted his answers, and remained entirely unconvinced. The next day, Jenny's phone came back to life. It started with a message to her friend Jennifer. David had just been questioned. He had sat across from investigators, denied everything with apparent calm, and walked back out into the world. And then the very next day, a phone that had been silent for 9 days suddenly activated. Jenny's phone, and the words that came through read like this: "Hi Jen. Tell Jack I am okay. No, everyone's going to be mad. Tell them I'm sorry. Living in Scotland with my boyfriend. Dad's going to kill me. Mom don't give a shite. Hope Nick didn't grass me up. Keeping phone off. Tell Dad car jumps out of gear in stores. Put it back in auction. Tell him I'm sorry." For one terrible fragile moment, it felt like relief. A second message arrived, this time to her friend Nicola. "Thought you were grassing me up. Might be in trouble with my dad. Told Mom I was lying. Been to Keswick camping. Was great. Have to go. See you." And then a third to her father Brian. Longer this time. Angrier. "Why do you hate me? I know Mom does. I ain't coming back and the pigs won't find me. I am happy living up here. Everyone hates me in Richmond. Only mate I got is Jack. Tell pigs I'm nearly 20. Ain't coming back." The messages were sent from around Carlisle, then from the Scottish borders. They were full of personal detail, the fault with the car, the names of her friends, the texture of her family tensions. Whoever sent them knew Jenny, knew her world, knew the specific private vocabulary of her life, and believed them. Of course she did. She was a mother who had been given back her daughter in the only form available to her, words on a screen, and she drove north looking for her. Hundreds of miles, chasing messages through Carlisle and into the Scottish borders, searching for a young woman who was not there, who was not anywhere that could be reached by driving. Jenny's phone never activated again after those 3 messages. It has never been found. D.I. Martin was not convinced. He said it plainly and on record. He believed those messages had been sent by someone else. Someone close enough to Jenny to know the details of her car, her friends, her family friction. Someone trying to construct a reason for her sudden absence. Someone who needed the world to believe she had chosen to leave. Because if she had chosen to leave, then nobody was looking for a body. Then investigators turned to David's movements. On the days those messages were sent, from Carlisle, from the Scottish borders, David Hodgson had hired a car. His whereabouts during those days could not be accounted for. The mileage accumulated on that hired car could not be explained. The distances driven corresponded, precisely enough to matter, with the journey to and from the locations where the messages had originated. He had been questioned. He had denied everything. And then he had driven north and sent 3 messages from a dead girl's phone, hoping that a grieving family's desperate need to believe their daughter was alive would be enough to bury the truth alongside her. It almost worked. But language, it turns out, is not as easy to fake as a phone signal. And someone was already looking very closely at the words. Professor Malcolm Coulthard had spent his career doing something most people don't realize is even possible. He studied the way people write, not what they write, but how. The specific unconscious habits that every person carries in their language, the way they carry their posture or their walk. The patterns so deeply embedded in how someone constructs a sentence that they persist even when that person is actively trying to sound like someone else. Forensic linguistics, the science of language as evidence. Just as no two people leave identical fingerprints, no two people write in genuinely identical ways. The choices we make, consciously and unconsciously, about spelling, spacing, punctuation, the words we reach for naturally, the contractions we use and the ones we avoid. These choices accumulate into a fingerprint as individual and as readable as anything left on a door handle or a steering wheel. Coulthard had used this science on some of the highest-profile criminal cases in the country. Now he was being brought to North Yorkshire for what was a first for the entire region. He was given 3 sets of material. Over 100 messages sent by David Hodgson. 11 messages sent by Jenny Nicol herself. And the 3 messages sent from her phone in July, after she had already vanished. His task was to determine, as scientifically as the evidence would allow, who was the more probable author of those 3 messages. He started with Jenny. Her linguistic fingerprint was specific and consistent across every message she had ever sent. She used the number 2 as a shorthand for two or two, but with no space, running it directly into the following word. She wrote I'm and I'm not as natural contractions. She used my rather than me when referring to her own possessions. She spelled phone with an F, phone. She signed off with see you. These were not random choices. They were Jenny, the specific, unrepeatable texture of how one particular young woman had always expressed herself in writing. Then he looked at the 3 messages sent after she disappeared. The number 2 appeared, but with a space before the following word. Not Jenny's way. I am appeared where Jenny would have written I'm. Ain't appeared where Jenny would have written I'm not. Me appeared where Jenny would have written my. Phone was spelled correctly. The sign-off was see rather than see you. Every single one of these differences was small, individually dismissible. Together they formed the portrait of someone who had studied Jenny's writing carefully enough to approximate it, but not carefully enough to disappear inside it. Someone had worn her voice like a coat that didn't quite fit. Then Coulthard turned to David's messages. The word off, spelled with 1 F, written as of. David made this mistake so consistently that during the handwriting exercises police asked him to complete, he had to stop and ask an officer how to spell it. Might spelled as might. Apostrophes missing from ain't and didn't. The use of me instead of my. The space after the number 2. Every feature that distinguished the fake messages from Jenny's real ones was present, consistently and repeatedly, in David Hodgson's own writing. Coulthard was precise about the limits of his conclusion. He could not say definitively that David had sent those messages. What he could say was that it was highly unlikely Jenny had sent them, and that David Hodgson shared enough linguistic features with the sender to place him among a very small number of possible authors. He had tried to speak in her voice. He had studied her words closely enough to echo them. But the unconscious habits of a lifetime had followed him into the disguise and given him away completely. He had left his fingerprints in the words. By January 2006, the investigation had been running for 6 months. 6 months of searches, forensic analysis, linguistic examination, and the slow, painstaking accumulation of evidence that pointed, consistently, repeatedly, without exception, in a single direction. On the 17th of January, David Hodgson and his brother Robert were arrested on suspicion of murder. Robert was later released without charge. David was bailed pending further inquiries, which meant he walked back out into his life while the people who had loved Jenny Nicol continued to live without her. Then came March, the 27th of March 2006. During one of the meticulous fingertip searches being conducted across the Sandbeck plantation, investigators found something that stopped them cold. A teddy bear and a portable stereo. Brian had given Jenny that teddy bear the previous Christmas. It had been missing from her room for 2.5 months before she disappeared. And here it was, lying in the undergrowth of a woodland that David Hodgson knew intimately. A woodland where he had built hides with his own hands, where DNA evidence had already placed him with Jenny. The teddy bear was not just evidence. It was a Christmas gift from a father to his daughter, found in the dirt of the woods where she had almost certainly been murdered. If there is a more devastating single image in this entire case, it does not exist. More than 150 acres of woodland, moorland, caves, and shafts were searched with exhaustive thoroughness. Soldiers were brought in alongside police. Still no Jenny. Her body remained hidden in a location that only one person knew, and that person was saying nothing. May 2007. Almost 2 years after Jenny walked out of her parents' house on Bolton Avenue and never came back, Chief Crown Prosecutor Robert Turnbull confirmed that David Hodgson was being charged with her murder. He acknowledged what made this case exceptional. Jenny's body had never been recovered, but he was satisfied after careful and detailed consideration that the evidence established a realistic prospect of conviction. After 2 years of silence, David Hodgson would finally have to answer for what he had done. The trial lasted 5 weeks. 5 weeks in which Jenny Nichols' private life was placed under courtroom lighting and examined from every angle the defense could find. 5 weeks in which her parents watched the people they loved subjected to a systematic and deliberate process of character destruction. The defense argued that Jenny had run away from home to escape an abusive father, an allegation Mr. Justice Openshaw would later describe as made without the slightest shred of supporting evidence. But that did not stop it from being made, repeatedly and in detail, in a courtroom where Anne and Brian had no choice but to sit and absorb it. Jenny's parents had not known about her relationship with David Hodgson before the trial. They discovered the truth of it, the grooming, the hides, the DNA evidence, the years of manipulation, in a courtroom in public while simultaneously being accused of driving their daughter away. The experience reduced them to tears. They described it afterwards as a character assassination, not just of Jenny, but of everyone who had loved her. Prosecutor James Goss QC laid out the case with precision and clarity. David had murdered Jenny on the night she disappeared and disposed of her body in the surrounding countryside with a deliberate and specific intention that it should never be found. The hired car records, the mileage, the linguistic analysis, the DNA evidence, the jealousy motive, the fact that David himself had told his family he was going camping on the same night Jenny disappeared and returned alone the following morning. All of it was placed before the jury methodically. The evidence did not need drama. It was damning enough standing still. Both sides rested. The jury retired to deliberate. 10 hours. A family outside a courtroom waiting for 10 hours to find out whether the system would name what had been done to their daughter. 10 hours in which the only thing keeping a person upright is the desperate necessary belief that the truth is strong enough to speak for itself. It was unanimous. Guilty. David Hodgson showed no emotion. He stood in the dock and received the verdict with the same blank, unmoved stillness he had maintained throughout. The composure of a man who had decided long ago that he would give nothing away and concede nothing to the people he had wronged. Mr. Justice Openshaw said what needed to be said. The defendant's concealment of her body has prolonged the anguish of her family and friends. I don't doubt that the thought she is lying somewhere upon the moors will continue to inflict further pain on her long-suffering family. The defendant has shown not the slightest regret or remorse. Life imprisonment, minimum 18 years. Justice had come. The verdict was right and necessary and deserved. But Jenny didn't come home. A guilty verdict cannot tell a mother where her daughter is buried, cannot give a family a grave to visit. It cannot fill the specific physical absence of a human being who was loved and is gone. They had won the case. They had lost everything else. David Hodgson has never said where Jenny is. Not to the police, not to the coroner, not to the family who lost her. Through every appeal, every review, every formal and informal request, he has maintained the same position he took on the night she disappeared: total, deliberate, unbroken silence on the question of where her body lies. This is not passive. He built those hides with his own hands. He knew that woodland the way you only know a place you have chosen deliberately. He knows exactly where she is. Every single day he chooses not to say. His appeals against conviction failed. Every one of them. And when his case came before the parole board, Helen's law came into direct and consequential effect. Formally, the Prisoner's Disclosure of Information about Victims Act, enacted in January 2021, the law exists because of cases exactly like this one. Named after Helen McCourt, a 22-year-old woman whose killer refused to reveal where her body was buried, leaving her mother Marie unable to lay her daughter to rest for decades. The law ensures that a killer's deliberate withholding of a victim's whereabouts is treated not as a personal choice but as ongoing evidence of danger. Evidence that a parole board is legally required to weigh. The board weighed it. David Hodgson's release was refused, and responded with the quiet, controlled precision of a woman who has spent years converting her grief into something that cannot be ignored. She said that if David had believed his continued denial would eventually walk him out of prison to resume his pretense of innocence, he needed to think again. His refusal to speak was not silence. It was confirmation that he remained exactly what he had always been. A danger, unrepentant, unchanged. As of the time this story was written, David Hodgson remains in prison. Retired North Yorkshire Police Assistant Chief Constable Sue Cross said she thinks about Jenny often. Not in the way you think about a closed case or a completed file. In the way you think about someone you failed to bring home. She said that ordinary things catch her off guard. A song coming on the radio, a particular stretch of countryside, and suddenly she is back inside the weight of the investigation, asking herself whether she missed something, whether there was an opportunity she didn't see, whether there is still a chance, somehow, to find her and give her back to Anne and Brian. That is what this case does to the people who touched it. It does not let go. Jenny Nicol was 19 years old with a Jimi Hendrix poster on her wall and a rock band that had made it to the final of Battle of the Bands and 23 tanning sessions waiting for her to come back and use them. She had a father who gave her a teddy bear for Christmas and a mother who drove to Scotland because 3 text messages told her daughter was alive. She had green eyes and a ponytail and a way of keeping her private life close to her chest that meant the people who loved her most could not always protect her from the things they didn't know. She was a person. Fully, specifically, irreplaceably a person. And she deserved every year she didn't get. And said it in the end with a simplicity that requires nothing added and nothing taken away. The child I gave life to, brought into the world and loved, has been thrown away like she didn't matter. Jenny did matter. She does matter. She always will.